I welcome all the participants of the webinar, and I'm sure we are going to learn a lot about the current science technology system in India. Before we start, just want to make some announcements. First one is switch off your mic during the talk of the speaker to avoid interferences. And the second one is post your questions in the chat box. We'll try to entertain all the queries. Wasting much time. Now I invite Professor Nirmala Chongtham, the coordinator of DST Center for Policy Research at Punjab University, Chandigarh, to give a welcome remark.
A very good afternoon to all our esteemed speaker, Dr. Ranjana Agarwal, Director, CSR, National Institute for Science Policy, Science Communication Policy Research, Professor Manmohan Gupta, Coordinator of CRICS, Chandigarh Region of Innovation and Knowledge Cluster, Dr. Chakraborty, faculty, members, scientists, students, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of DST Center for Policy Research, Punjab University, Chandigarh, it is indeed a great pleasure for me to extend a warm welcome to all, and especially to Dr. Ranjana Agarwal, because we were together in Kurukshetra University, and it's after so many years I'm meeting her, and she will be talking upon a very important topic, the development of national STI ecosystem and the role of private and public enterprises. And we are also would like to also mention that our center works on 3 mandates, and one of the mandate is development of a new country-specific model of public-private partnership in R&D. And so we will learn a lot from her lecture. And we are all aware also that the recently released draft of the 5th National Science, Technology and Innovation Policy, STIP 2020, initiated by the Office of the Principal Advisor, Scientific Advisor, and the Department of Science and Technology. And we know that the objectives of this policy is to identify and address the strength and weakness of the Indian STI ecosystem, and also to go for a social economic development, as well as to be globally competitive. Indian scientists, we do a lot of research, but it does not, very less contribution is given for the economic, social development of the country, because research does not really trickle down to the society compared to the developed countries. And so the new STI policy has a core principles, being that it should be decentralized, it should be inclusive, expert driven, and also there should be evidence informed. So we are very happy that Dr. Ranjana Agarwal will touch on these very important topic of the national STI ecosystem, so that we can be competitive. And now that we have to do something so that we can help in the social economic development of the country. So I welcome all again, and I just mentioned that Professor Rajesh Gill, Dean Research, she had to join, but she had some urgent thing coming up, so she will not be able to join us. But we have our coordinator of CRIC, Professor Manmohan Gupta. So, sir, could you please give an address to the audience? Professor Gupta.
Dr. Ranjana Agarwal, Director, Science Communication and Policy Research of the CSIR. Dr. Nirmala, Coordinator, Policy Research Center, DST Policy Research Center, colleagues, friends, and students. Well, a very good afternoon to all of you. I feel very much privileged to be associated with this very important activity of Policy Research Center as a CRIC coordinator. And let me take this opportunity, because there are many young people and there are, of course, many colleagues who might not be knowing much about CRIC. And see, CRIC, in effect, when it was thought of, it was essentially with this mandate, that participation of industry and academic. See, it was realized, the roots of CRIC lie in a report which was created by Narayan Murthy and his team, of course, envisaged by the government of India, how the private sector can participate in, you can say, in changing the landscape of the higher education, or in changing the, you can say, the very structure of the higher education. Because see, no government on the earth can really finance all aspects of higher education without the participation of the private sector. And fortunately in India, in the last 20 years, the private sector really come up very well, particularly in the software and related technologies. So it was realized that the mandate of the CRIC is not only to link the institutions in the Chandigarh region, but the industry also, which is around there. And fortunately, many of the industries have come up, they have interacted with us. We have been interacting off and on with all aspects of industry as well as academia. Moreover, this Policy Research Center was also an offshoot of the CRIC, because the CRIC, once CRIC was there and the DST wanted to establish Policy Research Center at several places. So therefore they chose Chandigarh also because of the presence of the CRIC. And fortunately, I have been associated right from the day one with CRIC and Policy Research Center both, right from their inception. See, I personally feel that, and since Ma'am Ranjana Agarwal is there, policy research is very much required. I have scanned so many documents. I have seen the Policy Research Center of Harvard University also, and many other places also. I find that there is a policy deficit at the international level. Not much work has been done. I will give an example. See, if a project is a mega project is submitted to the government, who evaluates it? It is the scientists who evaluate it, who are stakeholders. Stakeholders evaluating their own project. So the government doesn't know what to do with it. So there is no third party which really objectively sees the pros and cons of any mega project. Small projects, fine, but when it is hundreds of crores or thousands of crores have to be committed, taxpayers' money, then there has to be objective evaluation. And strangely, I have seen neither in Europe nor in USA, India, of course, we have to follow. We generally follow the Western world. We don't find any. I don't find any mechanism anywhere. So whenever I was associated with this center, so I thought that we must have to go to the roots and develop. You can say manpower first. First step is to develop manpower who can understand the problem. And at present stage, we don't understand the problem even. I have talked to many senior people also. So this talk, I'm sure, would be very enlightening because it has a mandate of creating the S&T ecosystem, wherein both the academia, the government, as well as the private entrepreneurs have to participate. This is one aspect. The other, of course, is, see, we in the university, we should not sit in the silos. We should just see what is happening around. And no government on the earth can create jobs for every student or every student which comes out of the higher education system. Ultimately, the students have to be taught to become entrepreneurs. They can be scientific entrepreneur also. They should think big. So I, in fact, put it this way, that at the cutting edge of knowledge, well, the government has to support that. All governments are supporting it, and our government is also supporting it. So at cutting edge of knowledge, anyone wants to do something really remarkable, he has to be supported. But as you come down to the lower levels, we have to think of, we have to motivate students to be entrepreneurs in all aspects. And I find there are a lot of ideas. The students have a lot of ideas. These days, there's a lot of ideas also, as well as confusion on the internet. So both are there. So if as teachers and as policy planners, we motivate our young people to choose the right ideas, they can do wonders. And I find that many young people are doing wonders. They are really, no, we can't say that we are lagging behind the West with the availability of internet. Anything which happens anywhere in the world, so it is there. So we have to create the right policy framework for the S&T to flourish. And I must say that this Policy Research Center has done good work, has been doing good work, and definitely lots of things have come up. I'm sure in course of time, or due course of time, we will definitely come up with a lot of ideas which would create the right ecosystem for the student development, also for S&T ecosystem. For, you can say, students should be bubbling with ideas. They should think that they have to become the job providers of future, not the job seekers of future. So with this brief remark, I would thank the organizers for giving me this opportunity to speak on this very important forum and on this very important topic. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much, sir, for this insightful introduction about CRICS and the importance of policy research. So, CRICS indeed is a great example of collaborative work by sharing resources to facilitate researchers and students in and around Chandigarh. So, thank you again, sir. Before we move to the next session, I take the opportunity to introduce our keynote speaker, Dr. Ranjana Agarwal. Dr. Ranjana Agarwal is currently the director at CSIR, National Institute of Science, Communication and Policy Research, New Delhi. Previously, Dr. Ranjana Agarwal has served as Professor of Chemistry and Director of Women's Studies Research Center at Kurukshetra University. She obtained her BSc, MSc and PhD degree from Kurukshetra University as well. After carrying out postdoctoral research on erythromycin biosynthesis and antibody catalysis at Cambridge University, UK and Tristram University, Italy, respectively, she joined her alma mater, Kurukshetra University, in 1995 to serve as a lecturer. Subsequently, she worked in many well-known labs such as Cambridge University as a Commonwealth Fellow, Trinity University, Dublin, Ireland, Italy, etc. Her research contributions have been recognized in the form of awards, notably Dr. Vasudev Banerjee Memorial Award by the Indian Society and Professor S.S. Katiyar Endowment Award by Indian Science Congress. She is a Visitors Nominee for Delhi University and Central University, Assam, and Chancellor's Nominee for many Haryana State Universities. So welcome again, ma'am, and the platform is yours now. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you very much, Mamta. Thank you very much. So at the outset, I would like to thank Professor Nirmala and Director, DST Center for Policy Research, for providing me this opportunity to share my vision on development of national STI ecosystem, role of public and private enterprises. So I am very glad to see a galaxy of experts in the audience. Dr. Manmohan Gupta is there, who is director of CRIC, Chandigarh Region Knowledge Innovation Center cluster. He is there. And I can see Dr. Chakrabarti and Mamta and all others who have joined this particular webinar being hosted by Center for Policy Research. I have been associated with DST Center for Policy Research, Punjab University, in the last I think 2 years. I have been listening their progress and how they are working, and I must congratulate them that the way they are fulfilling the mandate of DST, because DST created this Center for Policy Research in different parts of the country to take scientific problems and do the evidence-based studies on that, so that, as Dr. Manmohan said, that we have projects, we do certain kind of research in our labs, but how to evaluate, how to assess, like what kind of socio-economic impacts they are creating, how things are being commercialized. So I think these centers are very, very important. And this particular center of Punjab University, when we listen all the centers, so I must say here that Punjab University Center is doing an excellent job. So my hearty congratulations to the center. And I also knew about CRIC. And when we talk of public-private partnership, so I think it's a very good model which can be presented. So in today's talk, I knowingly excluded this because I knew Dr. Manmohan Gupta is there, so he knew much about that. But I think for general audience, I have tried to create a journey of STI ecosystem of India. And particularly when we are celebrating 75th year of our independence, Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav. So I take this opportunity to, traverse the whole path which we have, traveled from the British period to present times. So a small presentation I would like to share with you. So if I am allowed, I will share my presentation. So the title of my talk is Development of National STI Ecosystem, Role of Public and Private Partnership. And as I said, this time as it is the platinum jubilee year of our independence, so I dedicate this to Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav. And I would like to begin with the quote of Acharya Jagdish Chandra Bose, a physicist, biologist, biophysicist, botanist, and the father of Bengali science fiction, a true polymath who, in his address at Banaras Hindu University said, "Knowledge is never the exclusive possession of any favored race. The whole world is interdependent, and a constant stream of thought had through ages enriched the common heritage of mankind." So I think at this point of time, when we are celebrating Platinum Jubilee year, I dedicate this lecture to Acharya Jagdish Chandra Bose because he was in Indian pre-colonial period was the first Indian scientist who acknowledged the contribution of Indian science. And he always said, like, Western science is not new to us. It's only a kind of revival of the scientific research which we are doing. And as he said that science is not exclusive to any favored race. And you know, he not only said this, he practiced this also. We all know his invention of microwave, but how he refused to patent it because he wanted that science is for the welfare of the mankind. And also we know the kind of interdisciplinary work he started in the pre-colonial period. Many people even don't know in the school students, because in our school text, he is known as botanist, not as a physicist. So I think the first interdisciplinary scientist which India had in the pre-colonial period was Acharya Jagdish Chandra Bose. So when he said that we are reviving scientific knowledge, so that is a kind of evidence for all of us to recognize that India had a strong tradition of science and technology since Vedic periods, which has served the mankind for millions of years. And also our science was plural in nature, and welfare of the entire humanity was at its root. Few examples we all know when we talk of ancient Indian knowledge, scientific knowledge, we know that how India excelled in astronomy, mathematics, metallurgy, medicine, etc. But I would like very quickly share with you 3 to 4 slides which show that Indian science was not, exclusive only to a particular group, but any person, any tribal person, any society, even the rural people or the elitist had access to the science. And the state also participated in our scientific endeavors. So a couple of examples, for example, a dancing girl. This particular statue is available in National Museum. This is a 10.5 centimeter bronze statue of a dancing girl. So, and this art, it's a copper tin alloy bronze metal prepared by lost wax technique. And this technique is still available, valid, and we know it by the Dhokra artifacts. The second example which I would like to quote and which is still existing, I do not need any proof to say that Indian scientific knowledge was of higher excellence, of the Aranmula Kannadi. This is a mirror. Generally the mirror which we see today, it's a glass mirror where the back surface is polished. But it's a front surface mirror made up of copper and tin alloy, and its front surface is polished so precisely that we get the reflection, but it does not have the secondary reflections which the back mirror has. And this much better picture is projected when we have this mirror, and this mirror is still prepared by a certain community which is known as Vishwakarma family secret. So we can say that India has a very rich cultural and scientific heritage. Cultural, I'm saying, because this mirror has a high significance whenever a Keralite girl is married. In her trousseau, this mirror is a essential component. So cultural and scientific integrity was there in Indian system. Similarly, Gharat, which is an excellent example of conversion of kinetic energy into mechanical energy. And I will say this is the most green innovation, rural innovation, which existed since 7th century across all Himalayan regions. You start from J&K and to the northeast, we all see these water mills available in our hilly regions. Similarly, state also participated in scientific endeavors, and Kalanai Dam, which was 1st to 2nd century AD, in the time of constructed by Chola kings, and which is still existing. So these 4 examples tell us like how rich scientific technology, innovation heritage we had in India. But somehow, in the last 6 to 7 centuries, we lost that pride of Indian scientific knowledge, and particularly in the British period, in those 200 years were truly detrimental to Indian science, where we were told that Indians do not have scientific temperament, they do not have scientific logical thinking, and therefore that feeling of pride, that the feeling of self-respect we lost in those years. Most of us believe that the Western science was introduced by British to Indians, and it was for the welfare of Indians, the people they ruled. I would like to present here some scientific institutions which were created by British in the colonial period, and which today also we talk about them. But we must understand that these institutions were created for the systemic exploitation of Indian resources. The first one, the British basically, they were there in India for trade. But in 1757, it's the Battle of Plassey, which they won. After that, basically, they started, as administrators. And after 10 years, after the Battle of Plassey, they thought, like, if they have to rule India, they must understand Indian geography and Indian resources, flora and fauna, and how to loot it in a much better way. So this created Survey of India. Even if you go to DST sites, there also they say Survey of India is the first government organization on science and technology. It was created in 1767, but it was created to explore and map Indian territory in a scientific manner. Because from Bengal, they wanted to move to whole India. So they must know the geographical situation of India, and that's how Survey of India was created in 1767. And then came Geological Survey of India in 1851, Great Trigonometrical Survey of India in 1802, and Botanical Survey of India to explore the Indian flora, and they also produced British Pharmacopoeia of Indian drugs, and Asiatic Society of Bengal in 1784. This was basically the Asiatic Society was to institutionalize the Western science in India. But if you look at all these institutions which were built by government, I am saying, because we were ruled by British. So these institutions basically wanted to understand the natural resources of India. For example, Geological Survey was for coal and minerals. And if and we all know that time the British rail came, and it was the industrial revolution. So coal was needed, iron was needed, and India was a rich source for them. So basically they plundered Indian rich natural resources, which India was very rich. So all these institutions were built up. And there were several institutions came up in response to that. So that's why I'm calling it Vision of Indians' Enlightened Souls, building of scientific institutions. The institutions which British built, they didn't give due credit to Indians who were doing science. Firstly, they used Indians as, surveyors, as field workers, as laboratory assistants. They provided them science education only just so that they can assist them. There are several examples of discrimination which we can see in those institutions. For example, Radhanath Sikdar, we have the person who worked with Ronald Rose, Kishori Mohan Bandyopadhyay, and many others. So in response to that, our scientists, those were visionary at that time, created scientific institutions where Indians can work for on Indian problems and Indian solutions. And these institutions, I have mentioned only a few. Indian Association of Cultivation of Science in Kolkata, 1876. It was established by Dr. Mahendra Lal Sarkar, who himself was an MBBS doctor, trained in Western medicine, but he then switched to homeopathic medicine, and British didn't like it. He was vice president of the society. He was removed from that. So he developed Indian Association of Cultivation of Science, and it was basically, a platform for scientists. C.V. Raman also worked in this institution, got the Nobel Prize for India. It was for advancement of original research by native Indians and its application to the arts and comforts of life. This institutions was totally unaided by government, the British, and it was solely indigenous and purely national in character. Similarly, Jagdish Chandra Bose, who also faced discrimination in the Presidency College, where he was not given, in the imperial services, he was not given the opportunity. He was offered only half the salary of the offer to the British, which he refused to accept for 3 years continuously. So Jagdish Chandra Bose also wanted to create an institution which was truly indigenous and having, this is the first Asia's research center devoted to interdisciplinary research. On the pattern of Indian Association of Cultivation of Science, Maharashtra Association for Cultivation of Science was established by Professor Shankar Purushottam Agarkar, which is now named as Agarkar Research Institute. And in 1992, it's part of a DBT lab. Similarly, Indian Institute of Science, that was established in 1909 by Jamshedji Tata. There is a very interesting story that Swami Vivekananda and Jamshedji Tata were traveling in the same ship. And when Swami Vivekananda explored, like, where are you going? So Jamshedji Tata told about, like, he wanted to establish the industry and he wanted to borrow the technology from the West to establish it. So Swamiji said, they will give you yantra and tantra, but they will not give you mantra. The meaning is, they will give you the technology, they will give you the resources, but they will not tell you how this technology has been developed. That's mantra. So for mantra, you must create institutions in India itself where the original research can be carried out. And inspired by Swami Vivekananda's thoughts, Jamshedji Tata established Indian Institute of Science at Bangalore, and this is world's best institution in the field of scientific research and education. Similarly, CSIR, Council of Scientific and Industrial Research, by 1940s, we were sure, like, British are going to leave the country. But after the independence, we are not looking just for the political independence. We are also looking at the economic independence, and that will come only through industrialization. And therefore, CSIR was established in 1942, Council of Scientific and Industrial Research, that how scientific outcomes can be created and help the development of industries. Education, Dr. Gupta, Professor Gupta has said, like, university system also play a very important role. Academic institutions also have a very important role in the development of STI. So in that period also, educational institutions were created. For example, Banaras Hindu University, 1960, Pandit Madan Mohan Malviya created that. He was the founder of that. But the interesting thing is the land was provided by the state. Kings of Darbhanga and Banaras, they provided the land for Banaras Hindu University. Similarly, Baroda's Kala Bhavan Technical Institute, it contributed to the growth of Baroda as a manufacturing and industrial center between 1890 and 1910, and this was also patronized by the kings of Baroda. Maharaja of Mysore donated 300 acres of land for the establishment of Indian Institute of Science, which Jamshedji Tata established. So one can see here the important thing is that these institutions which were built before independence in the colonial period, they were so far ahead of their times that even today, if you look at the R&D ecosystem in independent India, these institutions like IISc, Tata Institute of Social Sciences, BHU, Tata Institute of Fundamental Research, Indian Association of Cultivation of Science, etc., etc., they still are playing the role of leading institutions in STI ecosystem. From the in the independence period, you can say the individuals also, which you can say the private enterprises also helped in the creation of out of the nationalistic feeling. They also created several institutions for the promotion of scientific research. Some of them, IISc, I have talked about, Tata Institute of Social Sciences, Tata Memorial Hospital, Tata Institute of Fundamental Research, and the entrepreneurships like Tata Iron and Steel Company, Tata Hydroelectric Power Supply Company, Andhra Valley Power Supply Company. All these enterprises were established by Tata before independence. Coming to a great scientist and a nationalist, people call him revolutionary in the garb of a scientist, Acharya Praful Chandra Ray. He basically proposed the first example in India of academia-industry relationship. In 1901, Acharya P.C. Ray established first India's pharmaceutical company, Bengal Chemicals, which is now known as BCPWL. With a capital of only 800 rupees. And not only that, after that, he established many more industries like Praful Chandra Cotton Mills, Bengal Salt Manufacturing Company, Bengal Potteries, Bengal Enamel, National Tanneries, Navigation, etc., etc. And interesting part is that Praful Chandra never took any money from the profit of these companies. He always established the industry, and then he later left it for the to grow it individually. He never earned money, any profit out of those industries. So these were few examples of STI ecosystem where academia industry relationship one can see from the very beginning, which we talked today. And similarly, Indian Industrial Association, 1891, it was created by Pramath Nath Bose. He was working in Geological Survey of India, a very fine geologist. He also faced discrimination when a 10-year younger his junior was made Director General of Geological Survey of India. So he resigned and he joined Tata and established Jamshednagar. So he established Indian Industrial Association, which organized popular lecture series on coals and fibers and promoted experiments with indigenous raw materials. Now coming to post-independence era. So we can easily say that in late 19th century and early 20th century, there were several scientists who gave boost to indigenized science. So therefore, when we got independent, we valued the scientific knowledge, and therefore, after post-independence era, our vision was quite clear that how science and technology has to be promoted in the country. If we look at globally, in 1940s, growing realization of the crucial role played by government-sponsored research in Second World War. In Second World War, we all know how the weapons and artillery, transportation, and medicines, biofield, how they explode. So all these research were sponsored by government funds. So after the Second World War, government realized that the research funding should be enough for the science to grow. And therefore, in 1947, when India got independent, it thought of a science and technology framework for promotion of scientific temper. It is in our constitution also. So that the thinking was that we must inculcate rational thinking among masses so that they can lead solving countries' problem through development of new technologies. So the first science policy resolution, which came in 1948, four policies we have already seen, and STIP 2020 is like about to roll. So in 1947 to 1960s, we have the science policy resolution. In this period, our focus was not on technology particular, but to develop scientific temper, humanism, and spirit of inquiry and reform. We wanted to create infrastructure, institutions, so that S&T education can be promoted in the focus. In 1970s and 80s, technology policy statement came. So here it was expected that R&D institutions should grow. A National Commission on Science and Technology was established to formulate policy for reorientation of S&T. Department of Science and Technology was created in this period. Import substitution was looked at, and translation of the research effort into technology, leading up of the production in area like electronics, drugs, pesticides, chemicals, and power generating equipments. After 1990, this was the turning point. Paradigm shift took place in this period, very crucial period, where liberalization of economy occurred in 1991. So there was increased emphasis on serving the interests of private sector industry through public-private partnership. Element of innovation also became very crucial at that time. Skill development, attracting talented youth towards science, gender parity, and increased expenditure on R&D. All these things were reflected in policy, science, technology, innovation policy. So if we look at the titles of these policy documents, we start with science policy, we come to technology policy statement, then we come to science and technology policy, and then we come to science, technology, and innovation. So we are growing step by step to get the holistic view of the thing. So if I look at the 100 years of journey of science and technology drivers in India through the times, and if I fragment them into a span of 20 years, so 1930 to 50s was the individual excellence. Here, you know, we can see several names. We have Homi Bhabha, we have Meghnad Saha, and many others. Shanti Swarup Bhatnagar. So these were individual excellence, where you do not think of the institutions or the innovations or the discoveries, but the discoveries were related to individuals. C.V. Raman got the Nobel Prize, so that is individual. And then we have J.C. Bose, Acharya P.C. Ray, Pramath Nath Saha, Meghnad Saha, and others. So individual excellence was there. 1950 to 70, it was self-reliance period, where we started building up our industries, our educational institutions, our R&D organizations. 70 to 90 was technology denial period, where there were sanctions, we were denied the technologies. For example, cryogenic engines, supercomputer, and this time, which was basically, you know, the challenging time, we proved ourselves, and our technology, you know, bloomed in this period. We could create our own computer, Param computer, series of Param computers, much cheaper, and that time it was at number 3. Similarly, our cryogenic engine, our space mission also took lead into this period. 1990 to 210, this was the IP generation and global competition. Several IP products and new innovations took place, and we were giving the competition at the global level. And 2010 to 30, we see India as the global leadership position. Coming to the science and technology framework created by Government of India. So if we look at that, we have, this is the whole chart, I'm not going to explain that, but the thing which I want to show that we have all R&D center where different ministries, not only science and technology, but all space ministries, environment ministries, all that ministries are part of the STI ecosystem. And in this particular ecosystem, we also include our academic institutions, our universities, central universities, state universities, our IITs, our ICERs. So all these, a good, science and technology framework has been created by our government. So this is also a path which we have traversed from CSIR, the oldest institute established in 1942, before independence, to ICAR, ICMR, Department of Atomic Energy, DRDO, Department of Science and Technology, Department of Space, Department of Energy, Environment, DOD, MNES, New Energy, DSIR and DBT. So this is our growth. So we can say India has a very robust system, S&T system in place at present times. If we look at the total R&D institutions in India, this is from the DST statistical data. There are 6,862 institutions having R&D, and in these 4,323, 63 are private sector, and the rest of them are from representing public sectors, our PSUs, universities, central government and state sectors, industries. But when we come to the R&D expenditure, here we see that the major share is spent by government, 45.4% comes from central government, and the private sector constitutes only 36.8%. So that means in our R&D, there are multi-sectoral players. There is a need that we integrate all these to get the a helix model, which is more efficient. Rising importance of STI ecosystem, role of universities and public funded research organization. When we look at West, we always see the solution for from S&P come from the university system. Academia plays a very important role, but in India, if we look at, our universities are not playing that proactive role in providing solutions. Generally, when we look for S&T solutions, we look towards R&D organizations, whether they are government funded or from the industry. So the phenomena of globalization and falling trade barriers in 1990s made innovation an essential part of product development. Also, after the globalization, competitiveness increased. So know-how and sophisticated knowledge, affordable at the affordable prices, that becomes the mantra. So knowledge base generated as a result of scientific research in universities and for public funded research organization became a paramount asset in knowledge intensive production. So this I have shown the interactions of various components of STI and the role of public enterprises. So knowledge generation systems are our public funded R&D organizations, universities, technical education institutions, vocational training organizations, science and technology parks, incubators, technology transfer support system, infrastructure, and knowledge application system is basically our developing solutions and industrial production system. And then there are government policy making and implementation bodies and other institutions, and they all include governance. So here we talk of triple helix model referring to interaction among government, industry, and academia. Also put universities at a very important place in knowledge-based economic development. But in today's time, if we look at, we must incorporate society also. So it's going to be a quadruple helix model where we have government, industry, academia, and society also, because society is also a very important component of our STI ecosystem. Rising role of public enterprises in innovation ecosystem development. With the rise in importance of innovation, the interaction between public sector enterprises and industry increased with time. Their contribution towards innovation system became evident in terms of establishment of science parks, incubation centers, and setting up of a technology transfer support infrastructure. Many prominent public funded R&D organizations set up departments to facilitate flow of research-based know-how to industry. For example, ISRO has Antrix, which takes the research, the basic research of ISRO to industrial component or to other stakeholders. Similarly, ISC Bangalore has CSI, Center for Scientific and Industrial Consultancy, to bridge academic institution and the industry. Other examples are CSIR. This is Nimitili project. It's the largest public-private partnership effort with R&D domain in the country. BIRAC of DBT, Biotechnology Industry Research, IIT Kharagpur sponsored SRIC, BSIL, Department of Biotechnology, Society for Innovation and Entrepreneurship, IIT Mumbai. So all these institutions which has been established, they are playing active role in engaging Indian innovation ecosystem. Now I will take a couple of examples quickly. First, the Bangalore experience, the role of public enterprises in development of innovation system. So Bangalore is known as the hub of innovations, and the credit can be given to so many organizations, institutions which are of world-class level doing the cutting-edge research. Indian Institute of Science, Indian Institute of Information Technology, Raman Research Institutions, and all the laboratories which are there. So they are giving, the boost to the STI ecosystem in Bangalore, and that's why Bangalore is becoming a hub. Similarly, IKP Knowledge Park in Hyderabad, which was jointly developed by ICICI Bank and Government of Telangana, a very good example, public-private partnership. It has been spread over 200 acres. It provides support to startups and the companies also, which are well established in different areas, be it life sciences or chemistry or metallurgy, material science. So this is a very good example where public-private partnership is happening. Role of private enterprises in development of innovation system. After the globalization, many multinational companies are also establishing R&D centers in India. I would like to name here two, though there are many, Intel and Siemens, which have opened their research centers in India. Similarly, India's software industry, we all know in 90s, people who are working in software industries, a term was coined coolie, IT coolies, that Indian were IT coolies. But today, if you look at the whole scenario in the software industry, Indians are on the top position, be it the Microsoft, Google, and all. So Indians are leading from the front, and the software industries and the growth of startup companies in the area of IT has risen because of that, the lead we took in the early 1990s. And the Indian software firms like TCS, Infosys, and Wipro, and global major firms, there were close linkage, and this has contributed to increased competence of Indian firms and added values to the innovation system. Similarly, I would like to take the case of pharmaceutical industries, where industry and private partnership has worked very effectively. One example of Cipla, where they developed medicine for AIDS, and here IICT played very important role, CSIR, IICT. So the combination of 3 drugs, which is known as cocktail dose, was available at $1 versus $35 per patient per day. So this is a very good example of public-private partnership, that how we can serve the society in a much effective way. And in present time also, IICT and ICMR and Cipla are working to develop COVID medicine. Similarly, coming to vaccine, India has also established a lead in the vaccine development much before COVID also. So there are government organizations, but at the same time there are private players who are working in the vaccine development. Government organizations are Hafkin Institute. This is the oldest institute on vaccine vaccine. Similarly, THSTI, this is DBT Center, DBC cluster, ICMR, CSIR IMTech, and ICGEB. So all these government organizations are carrying out research on vaccine development of various diseases. And if we come to the private sector, Biological E, Serum Institute of India, Panacea Biotech, Bharat Biotech, these are private players in vaccine development. And India in the world is known as it produces the maximum vaccine for the whole world. In the time of COVID, we have seen that how public-private partnership has worked in the development of Covaxin and Covishield. It's heartening for all Indians that within a period of 1 year, we were able to develop our own vaccine and were competing with the world. So Covaxin, which was developed by Bharat Biotech in collaboration with ICMR and National Institute of Virology, and Covishield, Serum Institute of India. Development and manufacturing of these 2 COVID vaccines exhibited the capacity and capability of India's vaccines manufacturing sector, which has developed very strongly since past century. The fact that Bharat Biotech and Serum Institute of India were able to take the risk and develop partnership with major international players is the evidence of strength of India's vaccine manufacturing innovation ecosystem. Unnat Bharat Abhiyan is another good example where Ministry of Human Resource Development, academia, IIT New Delhi, and the public enterprises which are participating. The success of industries in applying the scientific knowledge developed by the public enterprise depends upon its absorptive capacity. The technology is there, but can industry absorb the technology effectively is very essential. Priority accorded by public enterprises in developing linkages with industry. Sometimes a product is developed by a technology or a product is developed by the public enterprise, but the linkages are not there, like which industry is going to take it up. So I think this should be established while the technology is being developed or under the development of different phases. Similarly, coordination among various actors in generation of knowledge and its transformation into commercial output that is required. Perception that too much focus on applied research at the cost of basic research might convert researchers into industrial consultants. So enough emphasis should also be given to basic research. And then the quality of education is not able to match the standards required for cutting-edge R&D efforts. So I believe that the new National Education Policy 2020 will be a booster for the enhancement of quality in our youngsters. So this was about STI ecosystem from pre-colonial period to till date. Very briefly, I would like to show a couple of slides about my institution. This is National Institute of Science, Communication and Policy Research. This nomenclature is very new because we have been created by the merger of two 2 laboratories of CSIR, which were NISCARE and NISTADS, having the legacy of 6 decades and 4 decades. Both the institutions work at the interface of science and technology and society. So basically, we are also into the public-private partnership kind of thing. So this is now science communication, which promotes science communication to diverse constituents of all level and disseminate science. And the other component is policy research, where we deal with various aspects of interaction among science, society, state, and explore the interface between STS. Science communication wing, I will come here. We publish 18 scholarly journals which are peer reviewed, covering almost all the disciplines of science. And then we have popular science magazine, Science Reporter, which is in English. This is the most popular magazine in India, having the quality articles, scientific articles, Vigyan Pragati in Hindi and Science Ki Duniya in Urdu. We have biggest library of National Science Library on, and also we provide National Knowledge Resource Consortium, e-resources, and several books are there. And if you look at the impact factor of journals, we are improving greatly in the last 1 year. Our journals are having impact factor of the tune of 1.918, Journal of Biochemistry and Biophysics. Many of them are touching 1 and rest are improving, and we are sure that the contribution from good scientists giving the good articles, we will be improving further. On the policy research aspect, we are working of innovation, entrepreneurship and diffusion research, inclusive health, energy, environment and sustainability, agriculture and sustainable rural development, traditional knowledge studies, human resource development, mapping and global governance, and science diplomacy. And we are having expertise in scientometrics, patentometrics, socio-economic impact assessment of technologies, technology readiness level assessments, technology benchmarking, technology foresight, etc. Very recently, Prime Minister Office has desired that the traditional knowledge which are having scientific validation, because we know many organizations, many higher education institutions are working on traditional knowledge. So those traditional knowledge which have the evidence, which have scientific validation, which can be reconstructed, that should be communicated to the society. It hopes to serve many points. First thing is, there is a kind of myth being created in the society that traditional knowledge is a pseudoscience. So once we are creating, communicating traditional knowledge, having the scientific validation, so people will, there will be a change of mindset towards traditional knowledge, and we will start looking at our own knowledge with pride. Secondly, several institutions, will be encouraged to take many more such technologies as problem, and they will start working on that. And eventually, some new products may come out. And thirdly, at international level, when we talk of our intellectual property rights, once we have that scientifically validated knowledge as the repository, as the database, we will be positioned in a much better way. So I will also request to the audience, like if you also come across a traditional knowledge which is being practiced in a particular area, you share that kind of traditional knowledge with us. We will be sharing it at the right platform so that we can create that. So with these few words, I would like to end my talk, and I will be happy to take the queries if there are any. Thank you so very much.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for such an informative presentation and educating us with the very creative Indian indigenous technologies in India. So we got an insight of ancient science, science policies and its evolution in India, We have come a long way ahead, and we are among the top countries possessing great S&T profile now. So, and even now, DST Government of India is coming up with the new STI policy 2021, and we hope this will be a great success, and it enhances S&T profile of India further. Your presentation was very much in line with the mandates given to us by Government of India, and we are very glad that we have you as our advisory committee member, ma'am. So your guidance definitely will help us to fulfill the objective given to us by Government of India.
So without wasting any much time, I'll quickly invite Professor Nirmala for official vote of thanks. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Radhika. I'll just give a quick wrap. Thank you, Dr. Ranjana, for such an exciting and interesting talk. And you told about all the evolution of science, and we did not also know many things. So I have also just commented in the chat box that the contribution of our Indian scientists, they should be documented and put in the textbook, so that all the students, young minds, they know that how much our country was developed. It is not that the colonial British came and they taught us everything. That is missing. And I have also read articles where Westerners say that in Indian books they don't even mention their own. You take mathematics or you take physics, so we do not recognize in that sense, because nothing is put on documentation. And I remember in my school we studied British history. We didn't study Indian. Now I realize why were we studying British history. We should study the contributions of all the freedom fighters, and that is one thing which is very much lacking. And indigenous knowledge also. We always, researchers, we look to what is being done in the West. We don't really see what is good for our country, because the Westerners will do according to their requirements. So that indigenous knowledge, I think DST has also started a science and heritage research initiative. I think that is one point which will maybe allow people to go into these, because in the recent scenario, there is a problem with academicians for research projects, because it is mostly the institutes which is taking, because institutes and universities, they are clubbed together, but institutes do a lot of research, universities, so we cannot really compete. So 15% which is approved, it mostly goes to the institutes. So we talked about that experts, there should be a classification, that category institute and universities, when granting projects, they should not be clubbed together, because we do not have much chance, because they all focus on research, whereas in universities we have to do it with our teaching and research. That's it. So Dr. Ranjana, I would thank you all, and I also thank Professor M.M. Gupta, Professor Chakrabarti, Professor V.K. Ratan, and Professor G.S. Kent for being there and making the discussion so fruitful. So thank you again once.